Hi friends, welcome back. Today we're talking about proofs with segments. And I remember being in geometry and being in high school and thinking proofs were very complicated and difficult. But with just a few tips and tricks, I think you could probably handle these pretty well. So we're gonna start with these guys and I'm gonna give you some tips and tricks along the way. So you might wanna grab your notebook, make sure that you have this information. All right, we're gonna talk about our first proof here. We are given this information. FG is 10x minus 3. So FG is 10x minus 3. GH is 20 minus 6x. And then FH is 29. Given this information, we would like to prove that x equals 3. Okay, well, the first thing that we're going to do is whenever you see one of these, the first thing, there's a couple things you want to do. But in this case, we're looking, and I see that we can do segment addition postulate. Segment addition postulate. So let's do that. FG plus GH equals FH. Actually, I forgot. You're always supposed to put your givens first, right? We were given this information. Put that down. That's your freebie. That's your free points. After that, though, let's do our segment addition postulate. So if you have a segment and you're working on a proof, ask yourself, would segment addition postulate be helpful here? So FG plus GH equals FH. Knowing the rest of this information, what we can do is substitute that information in. So we will say FG is 10x minus 3 plus GH, which is 20 minus 6x, equals FH, which is 29. And that is substitution property. The substitution property, sorry about that. Our substitution property allows us to put those in. So now our next step in this would be to combine some like terms. And it looks like we can do 10x and negative 6x. So that's going to give us 4x. And then we do negative 3 and positive 20. So we have 4x and plus 17 equals 29. All we did here was simplify. So for number 4, all we did was simplify. Now, the next part of this, in order for us to get that chunk with the x by itself, we've got a minus 17 from both sides, right? So go ahead and draw our line here. Whoops, there we go. And we have 4x equals 29 minus 17. So just the... I made a mistake one time on this with like a really basic subtraction, and now I'm ultimately very paranoid. So I'm like, oh gosh, but it's 12. All right. Anyway, divide both sides by 4. Divide both sides by 4. And I'm sorry, we've got to back up here for number 5. When we get 4x equals 12, that was because we did subtraction. So I was thinking subtraction property and 29 divided by, or 29 minus 17. Subtraction property. Okay, now our next step is to divide. And when we do that, we are given x equals 12 divided by 4, which gives us 3. So for number 5, all we did was divide. The division property of equality. Property of equality. And you could say that for the subtraction property of equality as well. Okay, so let's talk about another proof with segments. Let's do another example, and I promise not to mess up simple subtraction on this one. Just kidding, I don't promise to do that. Okay, so given that x is the midpoint of y, w, and that we know that y, or wy and wx is congruent to xz. Okay, so wx is congruent to xz. Okay. Earlier I said the first thing you want to do is ask yourself, hey, if segment addition postulate would help me. But what you really want to do is your givens, right? That's your freebie. So we're going to list our givens right here. We're going to say, hey, these are the things that we are given. Now, here's a really key point that you might find helpful. If you see the word midpoint, or as you get into angles, if you see the word bisector, you have to use the definition. And the definition of a midpoint is that it creates 2 equal halves, right? It's exactly smack in the middle. So in this case, if x is the midpoint of these two, then that means, and you'll find it's nice if you have colored pens or pencils to be able to mark these. So we know wx is congruent to xy. They equal each other. So what we're going to do is say Wx equals xy because of the very definition of a midpoint. The definition of a midpoint tells us that these two things are going to be equal to each other. Now, another tip for you on this is if you've got equals to on these and you've got congruence, what we want to do is if you're starting with congruence, you're going to want to use definition of congruence because you want to get it to be this equals because that way you can move things around. So on our next step here, we say, hey, Wx is congruent to xy. That's just the definition of congruence. Def of congruence, and that will come in handy later. Okay, so the same thing from here. We had Wx is congruent to xz, and now we're saying Wx equals xz. That's the definition of congruence. Definition of congruence. I'm going to even abbreviate it with the little congruent sign. So, okay, let's see. Now, when you've done that, we've done midpoint, which is our definition, right? Maybe segment addition postulate would work here, but I think we might be able to get away with doing some substitution or even transitive property. It's really kind of a fine line between the difference between substitution and transitive property. Like 80% of the time, it's probably transitive, even though it feels like substitution because this is a new thing for you. So let's take a look at this. Here, back up here, we have this guy right here. We've got Wx equals xy, and then we have Wx equals xz. So you see Wx equals garbage, Wx equals garbage, then those two things equal each other, and that's exactly what we've just said here. We've cut out this middleman and we've said, hey, xy equals xz. That's xy equals xz. That's when we cut out that middleman, that's the transitive property. Transitive property. Okay, so we want to make sure that we have definition of midpoint in there. Look to see if there's something that we need to define. That's a good, helpful start. Look to see if segment addition postulate would help. Look to see if you can use definition of congruence or if you can use substitution. Those are all really good tips on finding a proof, figuring out a proof. Also, proofs can be done multiple ways. So if you're looking at your answer key and it doesn't match exactly what you have, that's okay, as long as you're consistently using reasons that are justifiable. You just have to justify yourself. Okay, it looks like we need to prove that xy is congruent to xz here. And what we've said is xy equals xz. So we've just got to switch that to be xy is congruent to xz. And again, that is just the definition of congruence. The definition of congruence says, hey, if these things are equal, that means that they're also congruent. So hopefully those tips helped you for segment 2 column proofs. If you have any questions, let your teacher know. Otherwise, I will see you next time.